Yeah, because it'll be.
Got it. Is it on?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay.
You can pick it up.
Okay, cool. Perfect, thank you. We good? Okay. Sure.
You ready to start, Martha? We ready to start? Okay. Finish your surveys, please.
If there's anything we're forgetting to talk about, you want to just ask us survey. Yeah.
We're still missing a couple. Okay. All right. Do you guys need to check for sound? We're good? Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Hello. Okay. Welcome to Zoo Crew, Engineers Gone Wild. I'm Miss Porter, and I've met all of you just a few minutes ago. And Zoo Crew is new, and today's program is being held here instead of the regular classroom. Everything that happens in Zoo Crew classes is designed to help you connect with, protect, and preserve wildlife. Protecting animals require us to step into their shoes, their paws, their claws, their fins. When designing for wildlife, many factors are considered, such as where they live, in the wild, in the forest, the desert, other places, or captivity in zoos and sanctuaries. With this in mind, I would like to introduce today's animal experts from Nature of WildWorks Wildlife Centers. Ms. Megan Platt graduated from San Diego State University, earning a bachelor's degree in anthropology, and then attended a summer volunteer program at a cheetah center in South Africa. She was inspired to work with animals and attended the Exotic Animal Management Program at the Moore Park College, which is about 35 miles away from here. She interned at the San Diego Zoo. Nicole Wilson, on my right, holds a bachelor's degree in biology from Cal State University, Channel Islands, also attended the Moore Park College Exotic Animal Management Program. She worked for 6 years at a butterfly project that breeds, cares for, and releases 2 species of endangered California native butterflies. Our experts have come to speak with you today to help you understand and appreciate the distinctions to be made when thinking about wild animals living in a variety of settings. There will be time for questions at the end of the presentation. Please give Megan and Nicole your quiet, undivided attention. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks for having us. So we did bring an animal guest today, and her name is Spring. She's still pretty new, and I'm going to tell you all about her. A little bit about our facility first. We do house non-releasable wild animals as well as a few displaced domestic animals, and we give them lifetime quality care as well as doing educational presentations to help foster a want for coexistence and conservation of these animals. So this here is Spring, and Spring is a little gray fox. So gray foxes are actually native to California. She's very sweet, so she comes up to you. Go ahead and put your hand out for her to smell. And that's part of the reason she's with us. So she came to us last year in October. We believe she's only about a year old now. So her name is Spring because she was born in the spring and she jumps very, very high. So she was born in Northern California, and she was born out in the wild, and she was found sort of wandering around a neighborhood, kind of very friendly, as you can see, coming up to people and looking for food, which provides us with the information that she wasn't very good at hunting. Maybe she didn't learn from her parents. Maybe she was kept as a pet and then escaped. Something happened in her youth where she didn't really learn how to survive as a fox and kind of more learned that people are good. So that doesn't really let her return to the wild because she would often approach people looking for food, and that can cause many problems. So instead, the rehabilitation facility that brought her in contacted us because they know we house other foxes, including one other gray fox and 3 red foxes, and we said, of course, we'd love to take her, and she's been with us ever since. So she's very, very sweet, loves people, and that's why she cannot return to the wild. But she has the very important job of being an animal ambassador, so she gets to come to places like this and show off her skills. We did design a few box and rope climbing because California gray foxes are actually excellent climbers. So if you know a little bit about foxes, typically foxes are digging and burrowing, that sort of thing, on the ground, whereas the California fox, being small, and this is her full size, will typically live in the trees. They actually have little hooked nails that are kind of like cat's nails, but they're not retractable, and that helps them with their climbing. So we wanted to make sure we had a way to show off her climbing abilities. She can actually climb right up a tree, and she does that at our facility often. So we'll talk about what the gray foxes do out in nature and how that affects our situation for her being housed at our facility. Most times I'm going to say in human care instead of captivity because we kind of transitioned our terms to be a different connotation. So when I say in human care, what I mean is captivity, if that makes sense to you. So out in nature, these foxes are obviously very small, but they are carnivores and they're actually omnivorous. So carnivores can usually be the top of the food chain like wolves, right? But we have the omnivorous ones, kind of like dogs. So they are related to canids. They're kind of a cousin to the wolves in that way. So she does look for fruits and vegetables as well. But mostly what she's going to be doing is eating small mammals like mice and rats and squirrels, maybe little bunnies that she could get to. Like I said, she'll probably jump all over you. She does give little kisses as well. So they're out there in nature and a part of the ecosystem. Here in California, they eat those small mammals and then they look for fruits as well as vegetables, some berries, that sort of thing. So when we care for her in human care, we make sure to provide meat in her diet. So she always gets chicken or a little chick. It's raw. And then she gets Fancy Feast because they actually have some similar needs in their diet as cats do, which means they need something called taurine, and that's in Fancy Feast, so she gets that. She also gets dog kibble, and then she gets her fruits and veggies. She loves carrots. Her favorite is actually pumpkin, which we found out when we wanted to do a little Halloween photo shoot with her and gave her one of those mini pumpkins, and she ran away with it. So we just made sure to cut it up for her so she could eat it. And then her favorite fruit is actually watermelon, so she really loves summer because she gets lots of watermelon. But she'll eat pretty much anything. She's getting some little dog kibbles right now as her treats because we always make sure that she has a positive interaction when we bring her out to new places and see new things. That's why she's pretty much going everywhere. So we give her lots of rewards for being out here. So that's pretty much her diet, and then, like I mentioned, she is a tree climber, so we have to provide that enrichment at our facility. So what we have is what we call our big play yard. So there's the housing for each animal, and then our play yard is a space where we can put different animals in there. We can put birds in there, or our foxes, or even one of our mountain lions. He has a tunnel to the space, and the space itself is on a hill, so it's got a different terrain, and then it has trees and grass and all of these things. And that gives her a big space to run around, and it also provides a place for her to interact with our other foxes. So I mentioned we do have one other gray fox and then 3 red foxes. We have pretty much figured out the personality of each fox and then which ones get along. So she currently actually lives with one of our red foxes. Red foxes come from Europe, and like I mentioned, she's a California gray fox. So they do have some different behaviors. So gray foxes being climbers, red foxes being diggers, but the behavior of their communication is the same. They do wag their tails when they're happy, just like a dog. And they have slightly different growling noises, but for the most part, if they're ever annoyed with each other, what they do is they kind of open their mouth, show their teeth, and make a little growl, but typically don't ever fight or bite with each other because that's called bite inhibition. So they know that it's going to be more of a problem to actually bite your aggressor. It could cause a wound, and that's a problem in the wild, so they naturally have that out in nature. So it's the same thing with wolves. When they're ever in an argument, it's going to be mostly growling because they don't want to be injured. So we can always look for this. Typically, they don't growl over much except for one particular swing that they both want to lay on at the same time, and then they'll just walk away from each other. So they have a really happy relationship anytime we take Spring out and then bring her back. They always have a little greeting where they wag their tails and they make their happy noises. She might do her happy noise at some point, we'll see. Sometimes she's a little shy when we're out, but she has a little kind of whiny sort of baby noise that she makes anytime we give her belly rubs and that sort of thing. And then the red foxes make a whole variety of sounds. They have kind of a hysterical laugh is their happy noise. So their housing is got to be big enough for 2 of them, since we do have 2 in there. But typically, housing for animals, you want to replicate as much of what they would have out in nature in your facility. So with foxes, like I mentioned, the red foxes typically dig. So when we build their enclosure, we have it built out of chain link mostly. So we have to put chain link on the bottom as well as the top and sides because we don't want them to dig out through the bottom. And then we have dirt enclosures. You can do a cement enclosure as well, but dirt is more enriching to them because they can dig, and it's just easier on their paws and their joints as well. It does vary in cleaning. So cement is kind of outdated now. It's usually used for quarantine enclosures, which is if you have a new animal coming in and you want to make sure it's not spreading any diseases or anything to your other animals. It's easier to clean off cement, but like I said, the animals typically prefer dirt or grass or something like that. And then I mentioned they have swings in their enclosure. So she has one and a red fox has one as well, and it's built out of fire hose. So it is hung up with chain link, or linked chain, sorry, from the top of the enclosure, and they have shelving as well that they can jump from the shelving onto their little swings. So the fire hose is a nice sturdy material that is soft enough to sit on that they really enjoy it. but it's sturdy enough that if they were to chew on it, they wouldn't be able to destroy it. So we typically have a rule with our foxes that the younger animals don't receive any blankets or cloth material, because if they were to chew it up, they could get strings in their system, so that's danger for them. So anytime we think about enriching the animal or providing them some sort of furniture, we have to think about what they're going to do with it. So I mentioned she is carnivorous, so she has those carnivorous teeth, so she can chew really well. So if you're going to give her a toy or something, you want to make sure that she's not going to be able to destroy it and ingest any of the pieces. So the fire hose is really great for that because it's a very tough material that they don't really chew on. It does take a lot of work to make it because you kind of have to weave it together, and it's not the easiest to do that. And then that one we made into swings. You can make them into beds, things like that, but they like the swings because, like I mentioned, she's a tree-dwelling species, so she wants to be up off the ground. Our red fox likes it as well. And also in their enclosure, she has a big tree branch that she can climb up and down onto the shelf and back to the ground. So she likes that as well. And for different enrichment that we give and then take away, that's typically going to be either a toy enrichment or a food enrichment. So I mentioned she really likes watermelon, so that's seasonal. So that one's a specific time of year, so it's more enriching to her because she doesn't get it every day. She only gets it when we have it. And then toys-wise, we give them things that they can shred and tear up, because being carnivores, they have that instinct to tear something apart and destroy it. So she gets boxes. We get a lot of cardboard boxes, and we'll give them to our rabbits, so they smell like rabbits, and then we give them to the foxes, and they really enjoy the smell of the rabbits. And she can have different things like insects as well. So sometimes we'll get crickets for one of our little birds because he likes hunting crickets, and she can have some of those as well because she will eat small insects too. Like I said, she eats pretty much anything. Conservation status for these guys, they're actually doing pretty well out in our ecosystem. So because they are smaller carnivore, they go a little unseen. So their biggest problems are going to be habitat fragmentation. So if you guys know what that is, that's when humans are developing their housing. If it creates a barrier between different territories, it's going to be harder for those animals to cross the territories. Definitely if we have freeways and things, it's not going to be easy to cross those, and that can cause problems such as lower diversity in their populations. So if the fragmentation is a problem between crossing, then they won't be able to make sure that there's no inbreeding, that sort of thing. And then obviously if they live in trees, we have to worry about lumber and that sort of thing if there's any deforestation. Like I said, she's native to here, so it's not a forested area. It's more of the California chaparral and that kind of scrubland and maybe some oak trees, that sort of thing. So their conservation status, they're actually doing pretty well because kind of like the coyote, they don't have a huge difference in sizing. They can kind of get into neighborhoods and get back out. So we typically tell people to make sure to close their trash cans because that's how you get wild animals coming to your house. Opossums and raccoons and things, they're looking for something easy. If it's easy to get to, that's typically what they're going to go for because it takes a lot of energy to survive out in nature. They have to worry about other predators. They have to worry about competition. So anything that will get them a meal faster is what they're going to go for. It's easier that way. So we do have to worry about trash as well because you wouldn't want them to eat something that they're not supposed to ingest. But like I said, they are doing pretty well. So typically when we bring out spring, we actually like to tell a conservation story about the Channel Islands fox. So they're a very similar fox. They even look really similar. The Channel Islands fox is actually just a little bit smaller. And they have a pretty good story because it's sort of ecosystem based. So the fox itself was endemic to the Channel Islands, so Santa Cruz and Catalina and all those places. And on that island, the fox did did not have to worry about birds of prey because the bird of prey there was the bald eagle. And bald eagles are a fish-eating species, so they didn't typically eat foxes, they would eat the fish. And then on that island, the foxes would eat small mammals, insects, those sort of things. And what happened is when people came to the islands, they brought with them sheep and pigs, and that kind of changes up the terrain, the plants, that sort of thing. And it also changes up what kind of predators arrive on the island. So if you have never heard of DDT, it was a poison or a pesticide that was used in farming, and it caused problems with fish because it would become part of the runoff, and then it would be in the fish, and the fish wouldn't die from it, but then bald eagles, which are fish eating, would eat them, and it caused problems with laying eggs. So the eggs would not have a shell hard enough for them to sit on. So when the bald eagles laid their eggs, they'd sit on them and the egg would crack. So that caused a problem with the bald eagles. And then with the sheep and the pigs being on the island, what happened is golden eagles, which do eat foxes, came over to the island to eat the pigs and sheep and also ate the foxes. So the foxes were then in trouble because they took over the territories there. And what had to happen is people had to intervene. They had to help the bald eagles so the bald eagles could return to their territory and take that back over to push out the golden eagles that aren't naturally there. They had to remove all of the sheep and the pigs that, again, were not naturally there so that the fox could come back to set that food web back up again, which they're doing pretty well now. So if you go out to one of the Channel Islands, you might see a fox that looks pretty similar to this. Anything you want to say? Okay, do we have any questions, or is there anything more you want me to touch on? Yes?
What is their life cycle, their breeding, how do they, in the wild, I know they can jump into trees to hunt and all that, but where do they usually sleep, that kind of thing?
Yeah, great question. So she asked about their life cycle. So like I mentioned, she's only a year old, and we have another gray fox that's actually 13 years old. So typically in human care, we double the lifespan of our animals because we have vet care, they don't have any predators or stresses like that. Foxes are typically a solitary species, except when they're with their mate to raise their young in the spring, and then they'll separate again to be solitary. So she would probably find a good spot in a tree to sleep, and that would be during the day. So she's more of a crepuscular to nocturnal species, so nocturnal being nighttime and crepuscular being dawn and dusk. So it can vary. Obviously she can be awake during the day, but she does have certain adaptations to help her be awake at night because that's when her prey's awake. Rodents are typically awake at night, so those mice and things that she's going to be hunting, she wants to hunt them when they're awake. So she does have vertical slit pupils, kind of like a cat, so that helps with her night vision. So their life cycle, they're probably going to live maybe 7 years out in nature. And like I said, solitary hunters, very sneaky, climbing trees, maybe making a nest in those trees because it's safer off the ground. They can dig, but like I said, the red foxes are typically the diggers that would make a burrow. They are canids, like I said, so we usually like to say they're kind of the perfect combination between cat and dog, but they are more related to dogs, being from the wolf. And if you didn't see, she was chewing on the cords, so that's something we always think about when we're in a new space. Like I mentioned with her toys, we want to make sure she can't eat them, so she never gets electrical things at our facility. So they're going to look for their mates in the springtime. So like we mentioned, her name is Spring because that's probably when she was born. Being here in California, they don't really have to worry about winter quite as much. We do get rain and that sort of thing, but it's not quite as dire as having snow. So she does have a little bit of a winter coat. She's slightly fluffier and denser when it is winter, so she shed that out and she pretty much looks the same. It's not that much of a thick coat for the summer, but she's nice and cool now. She has excellent hearing, and that long body is great for climbing trees. And I think I forgot the rest of your question. What was?
How many kids does she have?
Oh, great. Yeah, she usually has, I believe it's 3 to 5. I believe it is. So the kits are the young. They can have less than that. So typically animals, when it's a harsher environment, less prey, maybe it was a drought that year, they'll have less because it's harder to produce as many young. Any other questions? Do you guys want to pet her? Yeah. Do you want to walk her around, or do you want her to sit up here? Yes. Oh, great question. So she asked if we had to train her to be pet. She is very, very friendly. Like I mentioned in the beginning, she came to us because of that friendliness. She was actually found in somebody's yard while the lady was doing yoga. She just climbed all over. So she was already pretty sweet. We don't know if maybe somebody kept her as a pet, because that's usually how it happens. Wild animals don't typically come towards people unless they see a reason to. But again, she was very young. So her personality was already prone to liking people, but we do have to encourage that. So like I mentioned, she gets her favorite treats when she comes out, so it's always a positive thing. She gets all of her pets and attention. If she's ever afraid of noises, we make sure it's nice and quiet for her. Most of the training that we've done has been desensitization, so pretty much taking her to new places as often as possible and then rewarding her with her treats. So we actually put a leash on her like 2 days after she came to us, and she was like, great, let's go for a walk. So we didn't have to train that part because she was already ready for it. Most animals, they can feel confined by a leash, and you have to do a step-by-step process of them wearing it and deciding whether or not they're great with that, or if they'd rather be loose and just return to you at a certain time. So she was very good about walking on the leash. She wanted to explore everything. She's young, so she naturally wants to explore everything, and we just wanted to keep up the good behaviors she already had. But if we were going to train her, we would still use her favorite treats. We could even use clicker training, which is literally a clicker. I have one. So it's a distinct noise. Oh, that was really loud. Sorry. A distinct noise that is the same as telling your dog good. So every time we wanted her to be reinforced by this noise, we would click and then give her a food. So she would go, oh, the click means food. And then we can use the click to communicate with her, because obviously she doesn't speak English. But if we wanted to encourage her in her crate training, like every time she went into the crate, if we clicked and then gave her food, she would go, oh, when I move in here, I hear the sound, I get my food, that sort of thing. Traveling wise, again, she was already great at it, so we do have to travel pretty far sometimes. And we found that we put her in her crate with her bed of hay, and she just curled right up and went to sleep, which is the best situation. She had no nerves really from being in the car, which can be scary to animals because it's not natural to be in a car and be moving. She is, again, very curious, so she can always see us when we're sitting in the car with her. And then like I mentioned, she's mostly active at night, so she sleeps during the day. So anytime we go to a place and she's waiting for her turn to go on, she typically takes a nap in her crate or on a chair or wherever she wants to be. Okay, so we'll start with the first row. If you guys want to come up to pet her, you don't have to unless you want to, but you can come right up and give her pets if you like. You can come up. Anybody? Okay, second row. Come on up.
What did her fur feel like? Really soft?
She did. Anybody? a little about the fox she lives with. Our red fox, her name is Fire, and she's about 14 years old now, which is pretty old for a fox. But so she's kind of like a little grandma. She loves everybody. So that's why when we put them together to live together, we knew it would be a good situation because they both reacted well to each other. And Fire actually used to live with another gray fox named Smoke. He passed away though. Do you need something bigger than a box?
You can put her on the table, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the table? What do you think?
She likes to lift her leg for people to scratch her under there, and then she loses her balance. Anybody else want to come up?
Just let her sniff and then she'll let you pet her. There you go. She's better. You can pet her. Yeah. You want the leg? You want it up the leg?
That's the first stop.
You got the magic touch.
So does this species mark its territory?
Oh, great question. Yeah, so she asked if they mark their territory. They definitely do. They have a couple ways of doing that. One is scent. So they actually rub their cheeks on the ground when they find another animal's scent. And they will pee everywhere as well. And then if they ever see another animal in their territory that is of concern, they have an alarm call. I can't replicate it. It's a very weird fox noise.
Me too. I know.
Yeah.
So I hear that the wildlife way station is closing. So could you talk a little bit about the impact of that and on those animals as well?
Sure. So she mentioned the Wildlife Way Station, which is an animal sanctuary here in Southern California, and it is closing, which means that there are about 470 animals that need new homes because they have been homed there. So it's everything from bears, lions, tigers, chimps, a lot of chimps, to birds, reptiles, wolves. They have even domestic animals like horses and llamas and all of them. So what that means is they're going to need new care, and typically you can't send them all to one place because that's a lot. You need the spacing for them. So a sanctuary is a little different from a zoo because it's just a difference in the term of it, because zoos are typically open to the public, whereas sanctuaries are closed to the public and private except for when they allow tours and things like that. But it's all about the care of the animal, so they give lifetime care of the animal. Sanctuaries also typically don't breed their animals. That's something zoos do for conservation purposes, and sanctuaries are more about housing those animals for their entire lifetime. So they're not typically breeding them because they need the space for all the animals that are coming to them. So they'll have to go to new sanctuaries and other wildlife facilities and that sort of thing because of them closing down, which puts a lot of stress on the community because you have to find room for all of them. What happens a lot of times with any animals that are considered an invasive species, so like we have ferrets and hedgehogs at our facility. If we could not take them in because they're considered an illegal pet here in California, they would be euthanized if there's no place for them, unfortunately. That won't be happening with the animals from the way station. They'll all be rehomed somewhere. Fish and Wildlife, which is in charge of pretty much all of the native species as well as the non-native exotic species, will be in charge of finding new sanctuaries and places to place them. Does that answer your question? I hope.
Yeah, very well.
Great. Yeah.
What's the role of engineering for caring and helping all of these animals?
Oh, great. So engineering is super important because we have to house them, right? So I mentioned a little bit about how they're enclosed. We have to make sure that there's space for them, and if they have more than one animal, that there's space for both of them. We want to make sure that they have everything that they would typically need. So you're going to give them shelter, you're going to give them water, we feed them, but if it's a more dangerous animal like a bear and you can't go in with them, then you have to be able to provide them food from the outside. So engineering is really important because we want to be able to comfortably house the animals in an environment that suits them. So like I mentioned, she has a tree branch because she's a tree climber. They have shelving, that sort of thing. They always need shade. So we live here in Southern California where we have to deal with excessive heat. So she's going to need, we have mister systems at our facility for the really hot days. And she has shade cloth, but we can't put the shade cloth right on her enclosure because foxes like new things and they chew on them, so we don't want her to eat those. So we have to think about how we're going to provide all of those things for the animal. Biggest thing that we were taught at our school was drainage and water because you can't put in new pipes once the facility's built, so you always have to think about that when you're starting a facility. So pretty much add as much water availability as possible. We also put in electrical because there are certain animals that come from different environments to live at these places, and if they need heat, then you have to provide that for them. We have something called pig blankets, which are an electrical blanket that, or I say blanket, but it's like a pad, and it provides heat for the animal, but we have to make sure it doesn't overheat and cause problems for the animal sitting on it, and we have to make sure that it's protected from water when we're cleaning as well. Other structural things, I mentioned drainage. So if we do have like a quarantine situation, or if the animal's living on concrete and we're using a lot of water to clean and scrub and all of those things, we have to make sure it's drained properly because there's going to be animal waste in that. So we want to make sure it's in the right place. So we do have drainage as well. Anything else you can think of, Ming? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, good question. So he asked if any animals have ever escaped. We have had escapes in our compound. So our compound has a large fencing. You have to have 15 foot? I believe it's 15 feet, which is a little funny because we do have foxes which can easily get over that. So when we have our facility, we have to make sure there's nothing like boxes or any other tools or things right next to the fencing for that reason. We're in a good space because we're not really near any other people. We're kind of back in the canyon, so it's mostly nature around us. But if they do escape, we have to think about how to get them back. So it's going to be different between the animals. So we've had one of our red foxes actually dig out. We, like I mentioned, we have fencing underneath, and what had happened is because it's an older enclosure, the fencing was corroded, and he managed to find that and dig out overnight, and then he just went and visited the other foxes because he doesn't feel the need to leave because we feed him, we provide him with food, water, shelter, all those things, companionship. So he just went to visit his fox friends, and then Molly, our boss, came out and she was like, "Oh, it's a wild fox." No, it's not a wild fox, it's our fox. And he literally followed her back into his home, and we just made sure to plug up the hole and then move him to a different enclosure the next morning while we fixed the old one. But obviously we have protocols for our larger animals. We do have 2 mountain lions, so we're very, very careful with them because obviously we wouldn't want them getting out. They have a lot more of an advantage being a predator. So one of our mountain lions is completely blind. He had glaucoma when he was less than a year of age, and he had to have his eyes removed because that's what was affected. And he's about 16 years old now, and he's pretty much been blind his whole life. So he knows how to get around his entire home and typically doesn't want to leave his home. He knows where the gate is and just stops there. So for the most part, we don't have to worry about him, but we do have a protocol anyways because he is a dangerous animal. Our protocol is to go get his leash and walk him home. Our other mountain lion is fully sighted and much more mischievous. So for him, we never go in with him. We always have a locked gate between him and us. And for that sort of thing, typically with zoos, when you have large animals like carnivores, you're going to have a tranquilizer dart, that sort of thing for anything. You always start with protecting the public first, so we're not open to the public, but that would be the first one if we were like a zoo, and then making sure to find a way to secure the animal and hopefully getting them back. So with our animals being out for educational programs, most of them are very friendly to people. So if they were to get out, we typically call them back and they come right back. Any other questions? Yes?
Can you talk about keeping them mentally stimulated in their enclosures?
Oh yeah, great question. So she asked if what we do for their mental stimulation. So typically that's what's called enrichment. So enrichment is anything that provides a mental or physical stimulation. So we can give her, like I said, cardboard boxes, and we can fill them with shredded paper and things, and that gives her a sort of foraging thing because, like I mentioned, most of her day would be spent finding her food, or most of her night would be finding her food. So we need to recreate that for her so she's not bored. Coming here is enriching to her. She gets to climb, she gets to meet new people, try and steal backpacks, that sort of thing. It's all very fun for her. So that keeps her mentally stimulated. And we also provide the physical stimulation in her having different things to run around, to chew on. So I mentioned she gets different food different times of year. We can also hide the food, so she has to get it. And we can give her kind of puzzle feeders or foraging feeders. It depends on the animal's intelligence as well. We do have a raven, so he always gets his food in some sort of object, whether it be a paper bag with shredded paper, or if it's a parrot puzzle feeder where he has to figure out what to pull on to get the food out, because they're very smart birds. She's very smart as well, but she can become frustrated really easily, so we don't want her to do that. We want her to get the mental stimulation without any aggravation, really. And because she does live with another animal, we have to make sure that they both get their food as well. So if we wanted to do a puzzle feeder, we might put her in a separate area so that they're not going to steal from each other. She's very fascinated by the outside. And that physical stimulation or enrichment, like I said, we have our big play yard where she will literally zoom all around. She goes very, very fast, and she'll run right up a tree and run back down all around. We have a few dogs at our facility, and he likes to chase her from the outside, and she notices because she is faster that when she loses him, she double backs to find him, and then he can keep chasing her from the outside. Also, there's the social stimulation, so that enrichment, like I said, she really loves people, but also she gets that from the other foxes. So we do provide anything, like they are solitary species, but they would find each other in the wild and interact in different ways. So we make sure that she gets some sort of interaction in that way as well. Anything else? Do you guys feel more attached to foxes now, hopefully?
How many of the kids have ever seen a fox? Anybody ever seen one? Where? Okay. Okay, so.
Very cool.
So that was like in the desert?
Yes. They're pretty elusive.
The population is in, let's say, San Gabriel Mountain?
Ooh,
Great question. Yeah, we'll have to look that up. I'm not sure of the actual number. I do know their conservation status is low, so they're not endangered, but I don't know their exact population numbers.
Those hills and so some of the other folks here, and I've never seen one.
Yeah.
I've never seen one
I've
in the
seen
wild
coyotes in
either.
my backyard,
Yeah.
but never a fox.
They're really hard to see in the wild. A lot of people see red foxes more than they see the gray foxes.
How are they good for the environment?
So their role in the environment is pest control, which is a lot of animals' roles because there's a lot of pests out there, or what we consider pests. So rats and mice and squirrels and other little mammals like that, because they breed very fast and reproduce very fast. And so her role is keeping those populations down. So if you get rid of these animals that have that role in the environment, then there's going to be an overpopulation of rats and mice and everything.
Overpopulation. Oh, sorry.
Huh?
We don't really need deep on.
No. Yeah, so we love our natural pest control, which is pretty much any of the carnivores, because it is important to keep those rats and mice populations at a certain number, not just so that they're not in our homes, but also because they are a species that spreads disease so quickly, and as well as has the ability to deplete natural resources. So if you think about it, the animals eating the plants are just as important as the animals that are eating the animals that eat the plants.
We'll now go to one of our messages that we usually talk about, which is our pest controls that we use. We usually like to tell people to try and stay away from rodenticides and rat poison and everything. A lot of our animals are struggling because they're eating the rats that are poisoned, and then the animals themselves get poisoned. There was actually a mountain lion just found that had poison in his system. So
Thank you so much. Can we stay seated until is she okay with us leaving?
we can put her back really quick. I can just carry her back. Oh, you're fine.
We'll just carry everybody with us. Walker. Stay seated, please.